like to call to order the October 5th
Wanted to sign these,
meeting
probably just a signature.
of the Inspector Committee at 9:07. And begin with introductions around the table. Myself, Stephen Reinhardt, Chair of the Inspector Committee. We'll start here on the right.
Doyle Williamson.
Brad Phillips.
Kristen Moorman, Deputy General Counsel.
Michael Malloy, Staff Attorney.
Bill Jones, I'm a commissioner.
Mark Moore, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services.
Matt Hart, public member. Tony Slagle, Government Affairs.
Jennifer Wheeler, Track Education Manager.
Lee Warren, committee member.
Mr. Woods, can you hear everyone all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Brian Woods, public member.
And that's the only person we have on the phone at this time. And nobody online. Is he online? He's on the
No,
phone.
he's on the phone, but not online. And then Ms. Rose said she's going to be late because of traffic. And then Mr. Eakin's got a medical issue for why he's
Okay.
not here.
So we've got a quorum to do anything with.
And I don't know if you wanted to make a motion to formally excuse Mr. Eakin.
Yeah, I would entertain.
I'll make the motion. Excuse Greg.
Do you understand why
I do.
he's not here? Okay. Do you
No.
medical?
Okay. Second.
Major medical. Okay, I've got a. I've got a motion and a second to excuse Craig Eakin from this morning's meeting. Does I need to take a vote, members? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, for the same?
Probably need to speak up to Brian.
Can you hear us, Brian?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I think that we're using that microphone?
Yeah, but he hears.
Oh, he
That's
hears.
for the camera. This
Oh,
is for the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. First thing after that on the agenda is ratification of the minutes from the August 7th meeting. Any discussion on the minutes? If not, I entertain the motion.
Motion approved.
Second?
I'll second.
Kind of said that out of sequence. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, if not, all those in favor of ratifying the August minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? General comments from visitors on non-agenda items. Not a lot of visitors. We had 2 visitors. Any comments on non-agenda items?
They're all agenda.
All agenda? Okay. We'll go on to the next one, which is subcommittee. Reports from subcommittees. We've got 1 subcommittee chair. And then who else is on the education? You're on the education? Okay, we'll get there. Go ahead, Lee.
We met, we're still chewing through, kind of revamping the standards, but no substantive changes have really come up as of yet that we're really positioning for. So hopefully within the next couple of meetings, we'll have all that kind of shored up to be submitted.
Okay. Enforcement?
Nothing to report.
What can you share with us from education?
Not much. The last meeting I was teleconferenced in and I could hear very little, so.
That was the one last Tuesday?
Yeah.
And I didn't.
No, that was
No,
the
no,
SOP.
that was
last
SOP
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah, it was about a month ago.
Okay. Who else is on education?
Dr. Evans.
I'll let you say it.
Is the meeting over?
I'm
I
taking
thought
a-
maybe all the stuff had been covered.
I'm taking a second to adjourn.
Oh.
We were,
Probably coming right.
we were going over the subcommittees,
Okay.
and Leah talked about standards, and Brad about enforcement, and I was going to see if there was any
Education.
comments from the education side, just
Um,
kind of an overview, anything
Yeah,
significant?
I don't think there's any
Okay,
new items continuing.
okay. Good. And we'll go to the next item, number 5, is staff reports. Timing is everything.
Gosh.
I don't think we have anything from Administrative Management Services. That's typically Mr. Olmec who gives that.
Okay.
So go to the
On
next
his
one.
behalf, you're saying we're doing good.
Yeah.
We're all getting his weekly emails on the updates of everything going on.
That's nice.
It's pretty thorough.
I appreciate that.
It's been fairly quiet on the inspector side lately. Just-
Oh, don't say that. It's just,
Okay. Then we can go into the standards enforcement and education staff.
Real quick, Mike, and if this wasn't part of the, you got, Steve, I'm sorry, it's an open meeting, so it's got to at least stay cracked.
I will crack the door.
Okay. In your materials is the enforcement report. It wasn't part of the materials that were sent out, but it's agenda item 5 in your materials. And I will pull it up as well here. There it is right there.
This represents all the activity that's been taken since the last inspector committee meeting. We had 5 cases that had disciplinary action. You see most of them dealt with the improper use of a not current form. And then the last one was a unlicensed activity.
Were those on the new 7.5 form or even?
Since someone can file a complaint up to 4 years, it varies. We have, for our policies, basically, how we set out the administrative penalty for an incorrect form is basically, if you're, just for an example, say, someone did an inspection today, and they were supposed to use 7-5, but they used 7-4, it's $100 for every form you're out of date. So-
Okay,
Every version you miss.
Yes, every version you're,
regardless of how many inspections you.
well, we can only do it by whatever one we get. I mean,
Right.
yeah, they probably did several, but without the evidence, I mean, we only usually have, the one that's submitted. So we can only.
Which is why we have some at 200 and some at 100.
Well, yeah, that's probably, someone that
300
was supposed to
means
do,
way back.
what, did a 7-, was supposed to use 7-4, but used, 7-2.
The 300 was probably the register of the DBA.
Well, the 300's a 200 plus $100 for the DBA.
Were most of those incidental to looking into other
Yes,
allegations?
yes.
It's not like.
If I recall, in the past year, we've only had like one time where someone actually submitted a complaint. It was from an inspector saying, they used the wrong form. It's mostly from, people complaining about other things, and there's not enough evidence to support that, it's a technical violation.
That happens sometimes, just trying to get the inspectors to.
It
get
seems
them.
that some of the software they've been using lately haven't been updating,
Yes.
but,
Some of the older software.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That unlicensed activity, that isn't our same budget.
no, it's a different
I was gonna
entity.
ask, your friend.
Yeah, wait for that one.
Is it his brother?
Yeah. Brother Daryl, brother
It is,
Daryl.
yeah.
This comes out of Cyprus.
Cypress.
And based on the input from the committee on the DBA issue last time, we put something in the insight about it. Try to remind inspectors
Yes.
that they needed to do that.
And was that where, if you had a question, just go to the website, look yourself up? I think I read that
recall if that's what it said.
somewhere. Maybe it was from one
But I
of the
do know we put-
associations.
Your DBA, if you file a DBA, it should say it on the website.
That's what I mean. I
Pull your
think,
license up.
I don't know if it
Right.
was from the inside or one of the associations, kind of
I think
bringing the
it-
awareness. They said, if you're in question, just look yourself up.
I think that was part of what we had sent out.
Yes. And if you don't see the DBA, then it's not there.
Right.
Yeah. And it's an easy fix.
The Structural Pest Control Board, back in the day, those that are licensed to do the termite inspections or treatments, they would allow, and I'm sure TDA is still doing it today, but they would allow a licensee to go back and do an internal audit. And if they found any mistakes that they had made, report it to the agency, and the agency could not go back and fine them for those things. Is there anything that TREC might allow for inspectors to do something like that?
That would be, when we get around to enforcement.
Okay.
Oh, we are.
We are.
We are.
Well, typically, if it's just a DBA issue, and that's the only thing we find, we'll write an advisory letter, and that's.
But if somebody proactively
Well,
fesses
if we
up.
don't catch someone and someone just does it on their own, we're not gonna penalize.
Just a
them.
polite, yeah, like myself, I had one years ago and then for some reason it disappeared, so I reapplied 6 months ago. So there was a period there where I was probably open to somebody complaining or getting caught without it.
Isn't there a form now? Usually you just write a letter, but now there's a form.
There's actually,
Yes.
there's an
right?
inspector of DBA.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was, I filled it out, I think I faxed it in.
Yeah, you can submit it by email.
We give it out in each class, every CE class, even the guys that get licensed.
Okay.
Get travel.
Any other discussion on disciplinary action?
Was there a time frame for corrective action? I mean, did you all have it? I'm just curious down the road.
It was like after, I don't know the details, I'd have to get the details and get back to you.
Yeah.
Is that something
Like
to
a
discuss
statute of
further in
limitations?
education?
Yeah, kind of a,
Well,
Well, I mean, like if you did the audit, then they would allow you so long after you found out any violations to fix them.
To correct them.
Right.
I see that as a potential, because the software companies that are not updating their software, they're really responsible for making sure that their software performs correctly for their customers. And if they're the ones responsible for not updating the number on the bottom of the page of the form in general, then I don't see how, if I were to discover that and be able to report to the agency that a mistake has been made and not have to pay a penalty for that, because it's really, there's some things that are out of the control of the home inspector.
But ultimately,
it's
that inspector is responsible.
But see, I think so too. It's, I mean, when
Yeah,
I knew this was coming up, I contacted
Yeah.
my guy and said, hey, here's my 7.4, can you just go ahead and update it? Boop, and just the next day
Yeah.
send it back, and then as soon as that date switched, I switched the template.
Because there's enough providers that if the provider for your form isn't updating, you know, like, find a new one. Competition will go up.
I agree that the inspector is ultimately responsible, but we do have situations that come up in our lives that throw us off kilter a bit. And that's where I see inspectors potentially falling into a trap like that. If there's something has happened in their life that's drawn them away from compliance, they
I
can
guess
correct
I'm
it.
a little OCD because I scan down and look at the number and I see the new comments and I've even checked it a few times just when I open templates to make sure it doesn't, you know, go back.
Yeah.
Well, and that's also a reason that the commission generally allows a phase-in period when we have a form changeover. You know, we allow anywhere from 3 to 6 months before the new form is required.
Just a thought for consideration.
I think you can always confess. Confession is good.
Cleanse your soul.
I mean, in these situations, they're not reprimanded or anything like that. It's strictly a citation, acquisition, and they're just fine.
Just make a contribution to the fund.
So what prompts us enforcement subcommittee meeting? Because we haven't had an enforcement meeting all year.
If there's an issue the staff has a question about,
Okay.
then they would contact me, then I would call a subcommittee meeting.
Okay. So most of them
But
have
I'm
been
not,
pretty
I'm
clear
not
cut all
gonna call a
year.
subcommittee meeting just to have
For
a
that,
meeting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, it's rule issues. If something comes up and the committee needs to weigh in on some rules, enforcement rules, then staff would contact the chair of the
It
subcommittee.
was busy when they were making the penalty matrix.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago.
It was more than a couple, it was a lot of years ago, and it went on for a lot of
It
years.
seemed like.
Yeah.
Just the other day. Okay. Fine, next, education and licensing.
This first report you've got there shows the number of applications received, licenses issued, and renewal activity through August, through the end of this fiscal year, and in comparison with that of last year, end of August. And as you'll see, we have an increase basically in total original applications that we've been receiving, over 17.5%. about 27% increase in licenses issued from those applications. And then we've got over 1,085 total renewals for our renewal activity. That reflects 64% of those individuals who were sent renewal notices renewed during that period. So we see a steady increase. And if we move from there to the next report. Tony.
Apologize.
This report here shows the total number of active and inactive inspectors that we've got. Again, we're looking at 3,196 total inspectors at the end of August. In comparison to last year, August, which was 3,073.
And I'd like to compliment you for fixing that where it shows the active and inactive total. That's a big help.
Thank you. And if there are no questions on this, and we can move to the next report, which is a report on our inspector examination activity. Again, we're comparing 2014, 2015. You'll see that we had an increase in inspectors taking the exam. For 2014, we had 60 real estate inspectors. This year, we had 81 real estate inspectors taking the exam. In 2014, we had 543 professional inspectors taking the exam. And this year, we had 703 taking the exam. First attempt pass rates are at 47% for real estate inspectors, about 57% for professional inspectors. Those numbers are slightly lower than what they were last year. And then on the final report, this is a report that shows the number of instructors that we have. And as of August, we've got 24 that teach electives only, continuing education electives only. We've got 104 that teach qualifying and electives. And we've got 34 instructors that teach the ride-along and Texas Standards of Practice Legal Ethics Update courses.
So, quick question, Gwen. On the previous report, we show that basically we had 496 licenses from original applications. So basically 500 new inspectors that were not inspectors previously.
And that's the L2 report? Which report are you looking at?
L1.
The L1. That's the number of applications received?
Yeah. No, the middle one. So the professional inspector license from original application, 496. Just looking at the professional side. So we basically have 500 new professional inspectors, right?
Well, yes, that's how many licenses were issued.
Okay, that's not renewals, those are originals, right?
That includes, no, it's originals only, so.
Okay. So then we have total active of 2,680. So basically we had, in the last year, we've had about a 20% turnover in inspectors, is what we're looking at, right? Am I reading that right?
Well,
Go to the next
go
report.
to, yes.
That's not a 20% increase.
No, I didn't say 20%, I said 20% turnover.
Okay, yeah, probably.
Because you got 500 new ones, but then we lost
We lost.
400.
Yeah.
Or
That's a
did not
pretty
renew.
substantial
When
turnover.
those are applications received, how many of those
Actually,
Right, I didn't go by
Those were
applications
issued.
received,
The
I
top
just went
one
by
was
original.
applications received,
It,
and then that middle.
licenses
was
issued.
licenses issued.
Okay.
Yeah, I just went by licenses issued.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I didn't realize until these numbers that was that high, that we have that high of a turnover rate.
New blood, retired.
Yes. It's a lot.
I mean, it's a small,
Baby boom effect.
it's a small
No, it's-
community, so
Yeah.
it doesn't take much to get a 20% space away. I don't know if that reflects any change.
I think it just reflects the number of years we've been licensed
Well-
and the age of us senior inspectors.
The ones with numbers under
2,000.
1,000
Under 2,000.
is probably,
Under 2,000 is about 20 plus
some are
years.
keeping them just
25.
to keep them. February 26th.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on the education? Is that finish the presentation on education?
Question.
Yes.
Eddie Durant, the Winston School in Dallas. When the 24 qualifying for ride-along inspections, does that also include the instructor for qualifying instructors as well, or is that different?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The 24 that ride along that are qualified,
Instructors.
does that also include the ones on top that say qualifying instructors, or is that different category totally?
Yes, they are from that category.
All right, thank you.
Does that complete the education? Yes, sir. Okay. If there's not any other discussion, we'll go to number 6. Discuss and possible action regarding comments concerning amendments to Chapter 535, Subchapter R, Real Estate Inspectors. And if I could allow staff to kind of explain some of the questions, I think maybe answer them.
Sure. Kristen Mormon, Deputy General Counsel. As the committee may recall, the commission has, and the committee recommended amendments to Subchapter R that were proposed by the commission at the last commission meeting. And we have received no comments on those proposed amendments. So there's really nothing more to discuss on those items unless any of the committee members have comments on those proposed amendments.
On the Subchapter R.
On Subchapter R. And just to remind you of what those amendments entailed, they were basically to align our rules with some of the statutory changes that were either included in the housekeeping bill that TREC submitted and the legislature passed in the legislative session earlier this year, or other agencies' changes that were made by the legislature. For example, the legislature adopted several expedited requirements for applicants who are veterans or their spouses. And so those encompass a lot of the changes that were proposed in Subchapter R. We also had a change related to granting a license for inspectors who practice in another state to make that consistent regardless of whether you are actually licensed in the other state under a regulatory scheme or you're just practicing actively in the other state, because as you know, many states do not have a licensing program for home inspectors. Then the other significant change was with regard to the consumer notice and requiring inspectors to provide that notice to consumers either in their place of business or on their website through a readily noticeable link.
But not, so if I do it in my office, I don't have to put it on?
No,
the
you
website?
do.
It's both.
Yes,
It's
it's
both.
and.
Both.
It's and, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. I will check it. It's not part of the web master.
Well, and these were up for
Yeah.
proposal. They'll be before the commission for adoption on November
Second.
But it's, the text is there so we can put it in, so we don't have to worry about it now.
Wouldn't everybody do
Yeah.
that?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's under 531.18. That's where the notice, is that where the notice text is? Carrie?
That's where the reference to the notice is.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll have a prescribed form.
Okay. So when it's adopted, we'll have a form that you guys
And
can link to.
I mean,
Right.
You
and
can link to.
implementation.
Oh, it could be a link, it doesn't have to.
Yeah, it's a
That's
link.
in
It's not,
the-
it's not the text, it's a link to that
so
particular
the print,
notice.
okay.
So
The
somewhere-
printed form we have on the wall, has that changed?
It has changed. It has changed. Yeah.
How long ago?
Well, it hasn't been adopted yet, but it will have
I
changed.
mean, I've got one on the wall at home, or at the
Right.
office. That one's current.
That's
That's
current,
been-
that's currently
it's about to
current.
change.
That's currently current.
When the
but-
commission, this is Carrie Lewis, General Counsel, when the commission adopts the new notice, and there's also another one related for real estate. The effective date's gonna be February 1st, because that's what the legislature dictated the effective date to be. So,
Because the one we have in force now has been there a while,
a long time.
Right.
because the frame's kind of yellow. Okay. Okay. Any other discussion from the table on subchapter R? Okay, I've got one, Stan Harbuck, that's listed number 6 as a comment.
And Roy, you kind of brought this up at the last meeting. Do you want to talk about it? It's about the expiration date on the 120-hour requirement.
Is that
That's-
6?
That's not part of
That's not
subchapter
seven.
R.
That's not part of these,
Oh,
that's
that's
not part of
General
these
seven.
rules.
It's under 7.
I don't know if.
It's not on the agenda. 535-212 was not on the agenda.
Stephen
But it's-
asked for it to be put on the agenda.
No, at the last committee, we talked about putting it before the education subcommittee, which is not met yet, to discuss that issue. It was not asked to be put on the agenda. at the last
Typically, they
time.
go
This-
through the subcommittee, and the
Right.
subcommittee brings it to.
And that brings a gap. There's going to be a time there because of how long it takes for things to be approved. They won't be approved till after March 1st, so
Yeah, if it's not
nobody can
discussed.
become an inspector in that time period. They won't, I mean, there are so few ride-along instructors. I think that's why there's this big push right now for people to get through. They realize the profession's going to be shut down come March.
I doubt that.
I don't agree with that.
Well, not totally shut down,
Entry.
but there's, entry's going to be hard. That's what's going to happen. Entry's going to be very hard.
So is there, I mean, Stan, you had number 6, which is subchapter R.
Yeah, which is where that 535-212 shows up, I believe.
It does, but
There
the
are
agenda
no
items.
amendments proposed for subchapter R in Rule 212. And this item is concerning the amendments that were proposed. So because there are no amendments proposed to 212, that's not an item we can discuss at this meeting.
But I made a comment about it, so it's discussion of comments about 535.
There's not a comment that has been submitted about Rule 212.
Yes,
No,
he
he
did
did
submit a
submit a comment, but it's,
But it's still not on the agenda. So it could be on a future agenda, or as was decided last time, it could be put up before the education subcommittee. If the education subcommittee decides they want to bring that rule forward for further discussion, they'll bring it to the full committee. But this is a rule, 212 has been in effect for over a year. That deadline has been changed at least twice. And that was to give time for ride-along inspectors to become approved and for providers to come up with different ways to accommodate that requirement. I believe, Roy, at the last meeting, you said your school was ready to go.
Oh, we're ready to go. I just
So,
brought it up
yeah.
for a point of conversation, just so we don't let it slip behind the eight ball if we're looking at putting the 120 and keeping it in place. But
Right.
whatever we ultimately gonna do, we'll.
Right,
ready
and
to
if,
do
and
it.
if that, because I was in Kristen's place when all of that conversation came on, and that went on for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And that rule was changed several times, and it was my understanding that the committee was standing firm in that deadline. Now, the education subcommittee can revisit it. If they feel it's of such a critical nature that it needs to be brought back to the committee, full committee, and a change needs to be made, and it's of a critical nature, the commission could always adopt it as an emergency rule. So if there is this shutdown of the industry, which I don't foresee, but it will be up to the
Well, new
policymakers.
people coming in.
It will be up to the policymakers to look at that and decide, then there are avenues that can be taken. So I don't think there needs to be any type of panic or,
So-
promoting panic in the industry.
So you're suggesting that, because first of all, I do know that the full committee does address agenda items that aren't proposed by subcommittees, so that does happen.
That's true, but
yeah,
it's not,
so-
doesn't have to be on this committee, but on this agenda.
Yeah, but I think that's what Stephen proposed last month, or last meeting, was that it be put on the agenda for the full committee, but I guess I'm mistaken, so. That's okay.
Yeah.
The
And the chair,
important thing is that.
the chair looks at committee, at agendas, and the chair decides what goes through subcommittees and what goes on, even if somebody suggests something, it's the chair's prerogative as to the agenda for the meeting.
Right,
So
right. No, I
he
understand
can
that.
consider your comments, and he can decide what's the best way for his committee to handle them.
Right, and I understand, I understand it completely, right.
I
But,
just had a question. I guess when the rule was made, what did the committee think? How many of these ride-along instructors did you expect to be a couple hundred?
Had no idea.
Actually, it's not an agenda item, we really can't discuss it. So when it comes up, whenever the next education subcommittee meeting is, or this next committee meeting, whatever the chair decides is the best way to handle this particular issue, you can make all the comments, that's all the questions you want.
Okay. So if there's no other discussion on subchapter R,
Motion to approve.
whether there is no action, right?
No action required.
No action.
Oh,
It
okay.
went to council.
Yeah, it was,
or-
it went to the commission for.
The committee has already recommended
Yes.
the commission adopt these amendments.
And it went. and
Okay,
it
so
did-
the action, possible action is if we wanted to change something.
Mhm.
Based on comments. Okay. Number 7, discuss possible action regarding comments concerning Chapter 535, Subchapter F, qualifying education. And Subchapter G, continuing education. Staff? Would you like to make a comment on?
Carrie Lewis again. Usually, when these changes are brought forward from ESAC, ESAC meets before this committee meets, and so you have you're able to see what ESAC has taken action on or made additional recommendations based on comments. This time it's the opposite. This committee is going first. So the comments that were received on these particular items, this committee can consider and decide if they think that they would recommend a change to the commission for inspector courses. ESAC will also be considering all of these comments and decide whether they are going to be making a change. There is one particular issue, if you want to jump to it, where based on the comments, the commission staff will be recommending to ESAC and to this committee a change to a couple of the rules, some fine tuning. So we can deal with that first, or you can deal with comments as they come. That's why I'm here today, to be the voice for the staff and ESAC on education rules, just so we can be consistent.
Let's go ahead and bring those out.
Okay. So I would say that the most comments that we received dealt with proctoring. Okay, and this is across the board, whether it's real estate.
I read a number of
or inspector, right?
the millions of dollars we're going to spend proctoring.
Right. So proctoring was an issue. I will tell you that was an issue that ESAC very strongly felt was necessary for qualifying courses.
Right.
And they did feel that technology could be used, but not just in the way of a identity question or an affidavit that the student signs at the beginning. What has been done a lot, they felt has not been adequate. But proctoring is a big concern, and then the other issue was exam bank, number of questions for exam bank. So let's deal with proctoring first.
Okay.
So what staff tried to think of how we could make it a little more broad in terms of the type of technology that could be used. We did some studies, and I think, Jennifer, you looked at quite a few of these. A lot of services that offer proctoring, not just a webcam where you're watching somebody, but there's a lot of services, and a lot of colleges and universities are going to these where it's not a live proctor per se, it's a proctor program where they have to have a camera and they have certain types of behavior that are observed that gets a flag. And then the instructor or a staff member from the school can go back and review later those flagged items. And they can then see, okay, that was a flagged item. He was leaning over for a long time. Was he looking in a book? He was, he left the room and somebody else came back and took his seat. things like that. They can, it's just a flag, and then they can verify and check those. So that's one type of program. Other types of proctoring programs, Jen, you want to talk about other ones that you may have found?
Well, yeah, it was kind of interesting, and I still have some research in the works. I'm going to try to get involved in some demonstrations, because a lot of these organizations offer that. You can get on there and do a demonstration of how it actually works. But some examples are, scanning your photo ID, checking that against your registration, and then like Carrie was talking about, there's facial recognition, body movement, tracking. Some of the costs, like even it was Texas A&M Central Texas, TAMUCT.
In Killeen, yeah.
Yes, that also offers proctoring, and the cost associated with that was only about $15 to the student. Some of the other costs I've seen are up to $50. So, that's something to consider as well. But really with technology, it's pretty amazing what they're able to do. And there are a multitude of services that are available, and with a wide span of...
Right. So I thought what staff tried to do in this rule then is to recognize technology is changing. There's going to be technological proctoring in the future, as well as the in-person proctoring. So we tried to change the rule to accommodate a broader variety. And so what we said was that we rewrote it slightly so that the proctor is either a faculty member, staff member of the provider, or a third-party proctor acceptable to the commission, and we'll talk about those in a second, who is present at the test site or able to monitor the student through the use of technology acceptable to the commission. So instead of observe, so you don't have to have somebody sitting there, but monitor. So it takes into account some of these tools that we now have technologically to do this type of monitoring. So trying to understand, we're not trying to make a bigger burden, but we're trying to accomplish the need for the proctoring that ESAC and this committee previously agreed was necessary. So that was how that was changed. And then we had a few comments on identifying available proctors. The word certified needs to come out by librarian. Yeah, that was just one that needs to happen. Okay. And so just kind of making it a little more general to help out. And then we didn't think there really were any corporate officers that would be proctored, that wouldn't be practical to the general public. So,
Good question. Do we have any statistical data to believe that this is going to be a problem? Like how many of all these courses, a lot of them are done by faculty and staff, so we're only talking, the issue appears to be centered around the third party.
well, classroom courses have always been proctored.
Yes.
So, and the distance education courses have been, at least when it was alternative delivery, when it was the IDEC approved one, they had to have an affidavit. That was the minimum standard. And then there were some distance education courses that would have some identifying questions, throughout to double check. But that really was it. So in terms of how many people is this going to affect?
I mean, of all the new apprentices that are out there studying for the inspector training through these alternate means that might be needing proctoring, do we have any idea if
Gwen,
it's
do
a
you know
significant number?
what the percentage of students are or applicants are that
I mean, there may be a
take
kind of
courses
diminishing
distance
return to
versus classroom?
Distance education. On the inspector side, it's a high percentage.
That do distance?
That do distance.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you say a high percentage of what kind of number?
Over 50%, 60%.
Of what kind of number of students?
How many students annually?
How many students annually that
What was that, 496?
Yeah.
77 new
Something like that.
applications.
So potentially there could be a couple of hundred
Couple of hundred.
students a year that are looking for some kind of proctoring.
Correct.
Okay. That gives it some.
For multiple exams.
Yes. I know I used proctoring, and it was the library, I've done the library a couple of times.
Yeah, that's good.
And, I mean, there are quite a few that do not change at all.
Right. And like Jen said in her research, a lot of colleges and universities, especially community colleges, which so many do have some distance education courses, have proctor centers.
Right.
Yes.
And back in the day, Ken is here, so he can attest to that.
Welcome, Ken.
Basically, all of our courses were
We're
proctored.
proctored.
And I know you all had a good system for that as well, in terms
Yeah.
of getting them proctored.
We just ran into the problem with, a lot of libraries started charging or didn't want them sitting on a computer if it wasn't an actual paper test. So that became an issue. We used to use notaries, but then that became an issue for us because every office has a notary. A real estate office, well, I'm talking about real estate, I don't know about inspectors. Just trying to verify, the affidavit stuff is great, but you can't prosecute somebody with an affidavit. I mean, it's just not
Can you state
feasible.
your name for the record?
Ken Trussell. Back in the day. I'm back in today.
So there's an apparent need to provide as many avenues for proctoring.
Right, and that's what we're hoping to open the language up a little bit to accommodate all of the different types of technology that can be used to accomplish this. And then, of course, the ELL staff, when they review, because all of that has to be submitted with the course, they'll review whether the method is acceptable to the
I
commission.
mean, even the church.
Yeah, and five is merely a list of those third party that are acceptable by rule. There are it's opened up to offer other options for the staff to review, to say, oh yeah, that works, that's perfect, you know?
Right.
So using somebody from church, there's a form to fill out to be accepted as a proctor?
When you submit your courses,
When you submit your courses, you would make us aware of who your proctor is going to be.
Okay.
right,
Before you,
right. And if something came up at the last minute for an individual, all I gotta do is call and ask.
okay.
All the provider has to do is call and ask and see if that would be acceptable.
Right.
So course and its proctor would be already approved.
Right.
As a part of the course approval process.
Right.
And then, like Carrie said, any changes would be as easy as just contacting us.
Right.
and-
Right.
Church would be a good place. You put in a good word just before the exam.
The goal is to be as accommodating as possible.
Right.
While providing
There's-
security.
I mean, I'll make light of it, but there's lots of, I mean, those 5 things represent a lot of places.
Yeah.
Right.
May I ask a question? Roy Carter, Director of Inspector Education with Champion School of Real Estate.
Yes.
You can just state that it could be by a library. You not have to state who the
Right.
library is, right?
Right.
I just want to make sure we not
Well,
just get that.
well-
Oh, yeah.
I say
That
right,
would be
Jen.
hard.
I may be overstating. How are we doing that?
Well, I would think there would be a method by which, with the application, the course application, you would let me know, this is the library that we're using, this is a reference person that you can contact to verify that. Because I would think that we would want
Some type of verification.
some type of verification if we're gonna put it in there.
Or
then-
this is a proctor center that we're using, or, but
Right.
they have students
We never had that in the
everywhere.
past.
Right.
Every time we've ever had correspondence, it was based off of the list that was there. And then the student could choose who was convenient for them.
And that's what Gwen and I were talking about, was that the provider may not know the proctor at the time they submit the
Right.
course application, and that there would be some provision that if the student needed a proctor who wasn't affiliated with the school, then they could notify the school and the school could let us know.
Right.
Before they could test.
Right.
So Roy, are you saying that you have a resource for your students?
Well, the
That they-
student would have a resource based off of where they geographically live. We may not actually know where they live or where they're planning on going to get this proctoring done.
But you
So
would-
us trying to say,
But you would send the exam to the proctor or send a
well, we
sealed
would say that
exam
just like
to
in the times past, because I was here back in the day too.
Mhm.
We would send it to the librarian. The
Right.
librarian would control the exam, administer it, and then either shred it or send it back.
Yeah,
But they
so-
wouldn't give it
okay.
over to the student.
Right,
Right.
so that would be
Right.
the method that you would describe in your application, and you said we would send it to any one of these that the student identifies, any one of these approved ones that the student identifies, something like that.
I guess I'm trying to, I think my thought is that we're trying to get too narrowly focused on trying to define who this person is gonna be or this
Right.
center is gonna be. When the student might call their librarian might say, well, I can't do it. So now I have to, can I go over here? And if it's on the approved list of what y'all already have said, it could be any one of these.
Right.
I don't know why we have to come back through the process of recalling you again or having them call you.
No.
And say, oh, they can't go to the library,
no,
they
that's
wanna go
fine.
to the church.
Yeah, I don't think you would if they're on this, that's why that list is up there, if it's a different one. If it's
Right, right.
not on
Something
that
that's
list,
not on
it's
the
something
list.
that's not on there.
All right.
I think that makes
That
more sense.
covers a lot
That's-
from
Yeah.
churches, military,
So not
libraries.
specify who it is?
What's that?
So not specify who the librarian is?
Well, unless it's something other than what we have in our rules, that what,
Right,
Yeah.
I think in your
So-
application, again, this is kind of a new process, and remember, this is gonna get rolled out, and to meet these, this won't go into effect until, January or February, whatever the effective date ends up being, and then you'll have, hopefully, 12 to 15 months, again, this has gotta go before ESAC, and we'll talk about that later today, too, to come up to speed with all your existing
I mean,
courses.
you're still, once the student applies for the exam, you're still sending the test to whoever they send.
We don't send the test.
The provider.
The provider sends
would
the test.
send the test.
So
So
the
they
way-
have to tell the provider, like,
Yeah, the way I
I'm taking a course
envision
with
it.
you, and then I just gotta tell you, hey, I'm going out to my church, and obviously, you're gonna have a name and a contact, you're gonna
Right.
send it to them. You don't need to know, you just,
Right.
if there's a question, you know it's one of those approved.
Right,
ones.
and it's
Okay.
just, the way I think it would work is that that's what you would say in your application. We're gonna handle the proctoring by, when we get contacted, who the proctor is, we're gonna send it to them, and they're gonna give it to the student, they're gonna ask for their ID.
99% of ours
Something
come
like that.
into the school.
Yeah.
We proctor on site.
Yeah,
But it's just for those few that are out there in the rural areas,
Yeah.
that it's just cumbersome to
Right.
make it into the major cities. so.
yeah.
So as long as you're using one of those, you don't have really any need to
No.
know
Then we're
who
okay.
specifically.
No.
but if
They
you
keep
want to
a
use
record of-
something
you can always-
outside of that, then let us know, just so that we can, like, these are all of the already deemed acceptable methods.
Right,
So if you are using one of those and you'll let us know that in your application, I'm using one of these approved methods.
yeah. Or if
Um,
when you apply, you're using one of these technological
Then you let
methods,
us know that.
then
Something
we're gonna be
new.
using this, and then they'll say, okay, we accept that method,
But
and
if-
then you're good to go.
And if it's something we need to look at that's not listed here, hasn't been considered before, then
Because
we'll
there's
look at that. You
Like,
can
for
let us know.
example, there are several online proctor services. ProctorU is one of the online proctor services. And some of these proctor services allow you to set up a business account. So a provider could partner with one of these online proctoring services and notify the commission, we have partnered with ProctorU or some other online proctoring service to proctor our exams, and they would refer their students to that business partner to get their exams proctored.
There is a proctoring form, so whenever this happens, then all of that documentation is
Yeah.
captured on that form, and then
Right.
kept with the student's file.
And that's the
Right.
thing,
So-
you keep that in case you get audited someday,
Right,
so that's
right,
perfect,
exactly.
that's
That's
perfect.
a huge field of third-party proctors available.
It's amazing when we started doing research, how many there were out there.
You can't run across a small town that doesn't have some of those things.
So that's what we want to do on that particular issue. So that is what I'm going to be presenting to ESAC. If this committee feels that there are any specific changes that need to take place for inspector-related providers or courses, that's what your discussion and action item would be today.
Okay, back to the committee. Any comments on the discussion we've had on third-party? No. Who's on Ryan?
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Have you followed our discussion there? Do you have any questions? Are you seeing the,
Yes, I don't have any questions.
okay. Okay, no other discussions here on the table. I have two comment requests from both Stan and Donna Harbuck.
And we're just,
Yes.
Were you going to address the other one first?
Do you want to take these in piecemeal fashion with the changes, or do you want to consider all of
I see what you're saying.
subchapter
Let's
F
do
and
that.
G?
Let's keep going with these, and then we'll talk.
okay. Okay, so the next thing that we got a lot of comments on was the exam question bank. So again, and I say a lot, we didn't get as many as we got in proctoring. We maybe got three remarks on the exam question bank. And so we tried to think of a way to make it, to accomplish the goal of having multiple different versions of the exam without having such a large question bank. So what we came up with, that we thought is sort of a middle of the road approach, is to, rather than saying multiple versions, require providers to have at least 4 versions of a final exam and ensure that each version, and what the changes are obviously in yellow, the rest was the proposed language, covers the topics, does not contain true, false question, does not repeat more than 1/3 of the questions from any other version of final exam. So you can use some of the same questions, mix and match, but you're not going to have a multiple version where you're changing 2 questions or just flipping the front and the back. So the purpose is to have significantly different exams. And then draw from a question bank of at least 4 questions per credit course hour for everything except the math questions, which they're kind of in an independent category by themselves because it takes long to actually perform mathematical calculations. But we even did reduce that as well to make it a 2-to-1 instead of a 3-to-1. So that was in response to comments, and that is what I will be bringing forward to ESAC next week on their meeting. So I guess.
Okay. Comments from the committee? We'll go to the committee first.
No comment.
Mr. Woods, anything?
No.
Okay.
And then in conjunction with these changes, Tony, if you'll go to 65, so those were all in Rule 535.62. So is that the only part that we changed in 65?
4.
Sorry. Right there.
65 was the proctors, and then at the very
here.
bottom, in that same rule of 65, going down, we already talked about all that. We just clarified that it must be a different version of the final exam that complies with the rule in 62 that we just talked about. So we're consistent.
If a student is getting a makeup exam,
Right.
Right.
they can't
They
have
can't
the
take the
same.
same, they can't
Yeah.
take the same exam
as
for
a
the makeup
makeup.
exam. They have to have a different version from the
From the exam.
collection of exams.
Makeup being different than a re-exam. like
Right,
fail.
right.
Yeah.
Right, so and that's just clarifying, and that's actually what this says, but since we're talking about specific versions, I thought I would tie it to the rules for consistency's sake.
So the definition of makeup means that, I guess I'm not understanding how it's being used.
If I skip the exam with my buddies, that night they tell me
It's-
everything
if
on it.
you
and I
fail
get
it-
the same testimony.
It's to take it if you fail it. Yeah, but you have the
So
opportunity,
it's-
it
So
is.
it's a re-exam.
It's a re-exam, so if you fail it once, you have
Oh,
the
okay.
opportunity
See,
to take it
makeup
one more
makes me
time.
think that for some reason they scheduled it, they missed it, and they have to come back and take it,
Yeah.
or something. I mean, I
So
don't
maybe
like
2
to
should be
see
a
it.
example, retake
Because it says
the final exam
the day after
instead
the
of
date of
taking
the
the
original
makeup.
class. Maybe that's what's confusing to me is the.
Yeah, we can
definition of
change the
makeup.
word
well,
makeup
I'm
to
gonna-
retake, because it says in one, it says, permit a student to retake the final exam.
Yeah.
So we shall complete,
Because retake is different than makeup in my.
yeah, yeah, we can change that language, that's carried over from
I'll-
our
I'll
current
highlight
rule.
this so
But
we can-
we can clarify that, that's a good catch for it.
And
I'm
then-
all for clarity in a rule, whatever
Tony,
we
just
can do it.
above that,
Yeah.
the last line on the previous page is J, that's the, so,
It's kind kind of, basically, you're talking about re-examination.
Sure, so retake final exam.
And number 3 below it says make a full.
Okay.
3 has to.
Yes, we'll do a word search, we'll clean that up and bring that proposal, that's a good catch.
Okay.
And I think those were the only changes that we were gonna make based on comment, that we were gonna recommend based on comments, is that correct, Tony?
Based on comments to those educational.
F&G.
To F&G, correct.
Oh, there actually was one more comment that we received that we were gonna make, I was gonna make a suggested change, and it's a deletion. And Tony doesn't have this up there, but I'll just tell you what it is.
I can pull the rule up.
You can pull the rule up, okay.
It's, which rule is it?
66. In our rule on, for colleges and universities, you'll recall that this was put in place at a time when we still had correspondence courses required to be associated with colleges and universities. So you would have a whole program of courses that would affect our license holders associated with colleges and universities. So when this rule was adopted last year or so, subsection G had a couple of provisions. G2 talked about if we, after receiving a complaint on a course that they're not complying with the college's academic or their accreditation association curriculum standards, then after investigation, and we found that that was true, we could agree we would no longer give credit for that course. Subsection 3 expanded that, and if we did investigations on multiple courses, real estate or real estate inspection, from a college or university in association with a provider, and we found several that didn't comply, we could just stop giving credit for any of those courses. Well, since we're not having the requirement of association anymore, and since we've had a comment that thinks this may be overreaching, and I don't see the need for it anymore based on the fact that we're disassociating, then to avoid confusion, I'm going to recommend to ESAC that we just delete that one provision. We always can go after each individual course through an investigation if we get complaints or we audit and say it doesn't meet it. If that's a decision, then we can say we won't give credit for it.
Regardless of where it comes from.
Regardless of where it comes from. For colleges and universities, it would be under Rule 66. For providers, it's under several of our other rules, particularly 67, I believe. So that's just for your information. I don't see any big issue with deleting it, and that's what I'm going to recommend to ESAC.
Making sure that tie in or it's not referenced
It's
from
not.
some other place.
It's not. And I think one of the concerns was, what if somebody's real estate program was not following, but the real estate inspector program was following all the requirements, then that should be penalized if this one's penalized. Not that we would necessarily do that anyway, but if this creates a worry.
And it's actually consistent with the way we're going to be looking at providers in
It is
general, which is if they fall below the threshold.
Right.
If their real estate program does that, but their inspector doesn't, the program doesn't, then.
Right, we're
only
doing it
looking
by
at the- yeah,
program
by
type,
program type.
so it is consistent. So that was what we agreed to recommend to ESAC.
Is there any
Does that
action
require
from us required to recommend deletion of that section?
You don't have to. If you want to, you can, or if you're having an objection to it, I would want to know.
Because you're presenting that to ESAC.
Right. But it doesn't affect inspector courses, but it was an inspector provider that asked for this deletion, just so you know.
Provider that does both, maybe?
Or that just does one.
Oh, no, I mean, does both inspector and real estate?
Right.
Sales?
So.
Okay. Comments?
I don't know if anyone filled out a comment form for you.
There is on 7. Does that complete your review of 7?
Yeah, that was the last thing that I think staff was going to recommend changes on based on comments.
Okay. Comments from number 7. Okay, now we'll start. Both Mr. and Mrs. Harbuck have comments listed on 7. Anything there that you still have a question at that maybe wasn't covered?
Well, I'm glad they changed those. The other thing might be to consider on the math, on real estate, it's 2 questions.
Yes.
Home inspection's kind of hard too. Should we do 2 questions there? I mean, ESAC always says home inspectors can.
I think that's across the board.
No, it's not. But the reason why it's that's small for math is taking into consideration the actual time it takes to complete that question on the exam. Not the difficulty of the subject matter, but the difficulty in actually having to do the calculations and the timeliness of that, how long it takes to actually have to figure out a math exam. I mean, HVAC systems may be complicated, but I don't know how complicated it is to calculate the answer to a question, whereas it might be for a math course. So that's why that's that kind of consideration.
So that 2-to-1 ratio is for sales and not real estate?
It's only for real estate math courses.
Okay.
Period.
Do we have much math in our inspector? I was going to say, there's not a lot of science around here. If I got to get out a calculator to do
That's the only reason that's the only reason that's called out independently anyway, those math courses, is because of that, the understanding that if you're sitting down and having to go through a bunch of calculations, that it takes time to do that.
On the sales side, I can see, I've seen their forms and papers calculating. For
But
us,
in,
it's
but
like-
in terms of that, the four to is it, what's?
2 to 1
It's still
is the
2 to 1.
question bank.
It's still 2 to 1.
It's just 2 questions
Two
per
questions per
subject
four.
matter versus
It's-
1 question.
It's still
per
2 to
subject
1, but
matter.
that's across the board for both real estate inspector and real estate sales and brokers. So that's all
The real
uniform.
estate side has a math component that there's
Right.
a number of questions we have.
Our math is limited to like, how many water heaters are there?
The inspection doesn't have a math component that's required as part of the exam.
Okay.
Real estate does.
Does it appear to be an issue then?
Well, did I just hear it's 2 to 1? Or I thought it said 4 to 1. What is it?
But we don't have any math.
It's not needed.
No, I
I think her
It's really
question
used
is
up.
regarding
Is
the
inspector
question
for-
bank, because the real estate math question bank is 40 questions, so it's a 2 to 1
2 to 1.
ratio. And the question bank for all other courses, real estate
Right.
and inspector courses, is at least 4 questions per credit hour.
Correct.
Which is still 2 to 1 because you have to ask 2 questions per credit
Of those
hour.
4
Right.
that you picked out.
It's 4.
Right. So it's still 2, the ratio is still 2
the same.
to 1.
It's just you ask fewer questions on a real estate math
It actually went
exam.
down. It was 6.
It was 6.
6 questions
Yeah,
per
yeah,
credit hour.
yes.
Now it's.
Yes.
Yeah, that was 4, yeah. So I'm glad they
Okay.
just.
Any other questions from
So
Mr. and Mrs. Harbuck on 7?
Oh, not from her.
I'm unconvinced,
Yeah. I think the point was that, you know, being kind of familiar with the real estate curriculum, I'm not a real estate agent myself, but being kind of familiar with it, because I have taken those courses before those, it's different learning about real estate than it is home inspections. You know, we're kind of a sub-engineering field, you know, and sales is not a sub-engineering field. It's very different. And so I think it's important to sort of maybe start thinking about the curriculum and the questions and so forth more from the standpoint that this is technical and it's not.
That's what we rely on the schools.
Right, no, I know, yeah, no, I understand that, and that's fine, but I'm just saying that it's good to sort of realize that there is a little difference between the way the curriculum is.
And that's
just
why
presented.
there are some of the significant differences are addressed in the education rules that they don't apply to. I mean, like the questions are.
But there's very few, and I am a broker, and I've taken that test twice. Once to become an agent, once to become a broker. But there's very little in that test and in that curriculum about sales. Very little about sales. It's technical information. It's contracts. It's law. I mean, it's those types of things. So I don't think the curriculum's all that different because it's not a sales test. That's what Keller Williams and the Ebbies and the Remaxes are for. They'll teach you how to sell. The test and the curriculum is teach you the law. What contract is, rule of law, rule of contracts, those types of things. It is technical in nature.
Yeah, I agree. So anyway, I guess I'm just, thank you, by the way, for responding to some of our comments. Really appreciate that, and being so thoughtful about it, Carrie and others. I appreciate that, and responding to them. I guess just without going over all of these, some of them were resolved by some of the comments that we had, and so that's been taken care of. But I think one of the things that, Texas is going to become the first state to require reapproval of courses. If there hasn't been a change in the rule, remember what we're talking about here is if curriculum changes in a rule for a course, well, of course, the providers have to jump in and say, look, here's how we're going to meet that change. We're going to add this on, we're going to take this out, whatever your requirements were. And that makes a lot of sense. That's the way it is in every state. But if there hasn't been a change in the rule, and the course has already been reapproved, and now it needs to be approved every 4 years, to me that raises a question about, are we going to be able to get the consistency from one 4-year period to another in terms of evaluating it? Or are we going to see some subjective evaluation of, well, I just didn't feel like that was going to work for this, you see? So it's a concern. It's sort of like saying, well, we've got to go through and reevaluate something that there's no change in the rule to justify that. So it just is going to raise a question. So that's our primary concern there. The other one is that I think has been, that could be considered, is usually if a course has not been reapproved, let's say, it expires, in other words, normally, okay, then the response is, okay, it's not been reapproved now, so how do we take care of the students that have enrolled but haven't finished? And so from what I can tell from the way the rules are written, well, that falls back on the school to reimburse them for the cost of the course because now the course is no longer approved, you see. So, and there are some financial requirements for providers to be able to help provide for that. And that makes sense. I think that's a legitimate thing. All states do that, you see. But putting on my thinking cap, albeit at a very small level, I don't think at a very high level, it occurred to me that why don't we consider a simple grace period so that if people enrolled in the course before it expired and they have the materials or they've taken some of the training, could we give the providers the option of saying, look, instead of reimbursing you for that course, because now you don't have to finish it because it has expired, let us go ahead and finish training you in this because under the course that you enrolled in and that was approved when you enrolled in it, and then give you a chance to go ahead and finish it, you see. So it wouldn't allow the provider to start adding on new students after the course is expired. That's not the case at all. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about what about these students that are kind of hung in the middle, they're kind of in no man's land. Because it seems to me, at least for us, I think, it's far easier for us to go ahead and finish training a student, even if it's under an expired course, but if we were allowed to do that, we could do that, than it is to go back and start talking about full or partial refunds depending upon how much of the course.
Let's address those two questions. The first thing came to my mind is if it's not renewed because of not qualifying, then there would be an issue of letting people, but you want to address those two questions?
Sure, and I think what Mr. Harbeck is referring to is in the proposed rule, we simply changed the word renew to subsequent approval, which doesn't change the process that has been in place for over 4 years, which is when a course expires, you have to resubmit it for approval under the same conditions as an original course. Now, can you resubmit your same course if it's all up to date? Sure you can, but the staff is going to go through to address specifically the consistency standards, the same review that they go through for a new course just to make sure that everything is up to the standards that are required of the law as of that date. Now this law, and I know Mr. Harbeck's courses and some of the other inspector courses have not been up for reapproval because they never had an expiration date. Some of those courses are over 10 years old. Okay, 4 years ago, the commission adopted a rule that said that courses have to be reapproved every 4 years. So as a new course was approved, it got a 4-year expiration date. But a lot of the qualifying courses on the real estate side and especially on the inspector side never had an end date. Some of those courses could be 18 years old. I mean, really, that long. Well, the 4 years is coming to an end. And at December 31st of this year, if you had not had a previous expiration date given to your course, it expires. So you have to submit it for subsequent approval or renewal, whatever you want to call it. But there is a review process that is equal to the original, to any original application, which in this case is very important because of the age of some of these courses. And that, I'll bring up another issue on that later that has to do with inspector approval of inspector courses, inspector committee approval. But in that rule, the commission gave all providers 4 years' notice that this was going to happen. In that same rule, the commission set out a scheme for how to deal with students who are going to be enrolled in your course that may expire. The onus is on the provider because it's the provider who knows whether he's going to submit that course for reapproval or not. It's the provider who has control over when they stop accepting students for that course. And the rule says that at least 90 days before the expiration of any course, that provider has to tell any student that enrolls in that course that the course expires in 90 days. So you have to finish it by this date so that they're put on notice. If they don't give them that notice and they don't finish it, yes, they have to refund them their money. Nothing keeps a provider from giving them 6 months notice. Hey students, this course is going to expire in 6 months, so make sure if you've got a long course, make sure if you're enrolling now that you can finish it by then. So, I mean, I think the system for grace period's already in the rule. It's been there for 4 years.
Question, maybe, and I know you restated last time, how far before that expiration can the school renew the course or resubmit the course so that they would know before that 90, so if the course expires in December, I've got an obligation 90 days before to let students know enrolled into it. If I wanted to just eliminate that whole issue, 4 or 5 months out, I resubmit so I know it's already approved. I don't have to tell anybody.
And I don't have that particular rule in front of me.
I think it's 6 months.
Because I think we talked about
We
they
talked
could
about
go
it.
6 months out,
Right.
and you would probably have.
And I think the rule says
approval.
you cannot obtain subsequent approval
6 months.
before 90 days.
Before 90
But you can
days.
apply.
But you can
within 6
apply.
months.
You can apply.
There's,
6 months.
I think
So
there's
you would know,
people-
I'm looking at the date, so if I applied 6 months out, I don't get approval till 90 days out, but that same 90 days, I gotta make notices to all my students.
Right.
Could there be an overlap where I would know, because I may have to be providing all my students a notice and not exactly know if the class, if it was renewed, then I don't have to give any notices. But if they're all at the 90-day mark, you see what I'm saying there? Can they know? Maybe they don't get the actual issuance till 90 days out. Can they be aware if it's approved so they don't have to give the 90-day notices? Does that make sense?
If they didn't have an expiration date, they could renew at any time. Is that not correct?
Right. Well, if it doesn't have an expiration date, these are the courses that were approved prior to January 2011. Those will be expiring December 31.
They have-
But they could have applied for a renewal
Oh,
at
yes.
any time.
Yes.
Yes.
I can
Oh, yes.
speak to that
Yes.
too. We've been, on the real estate side, we've been receiving these applications over the course of the last year for all of those without an expiration date. So we've been
But
reviewing and approving.
But you don't physically reissue the certification of the course until 90 days before December 31st?
No, if they're submitted prior to,
Yes.
we're approving them.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they've had no
If they've had
expiration date.
Yeah.
If they
Right.
did have one, then you're held to that 90-day before they expire.
Is that true?
If
I mean,
they
I was-
did hold a prior approval, then once we approve the new course, they have 90 days to get everybody through the previous course and start offering. And they can kind of be taking place simultaneously because you're running the last people through But then now you're offering the new course because the effective date is the date of approval. When I send you that letter,
Right.
you can start offering
So
the
you're
new
working
course.
with providers.
Absolutely.
To make sure that the students aren't
I mean, as a provider,
left
I
out in
would,
the cold.
Right.
I would like to avoid having to give notices to my students saying, your course is expiring, because that kind of filters out like a
This one.
virus. But I can, so if I can submit early enough, know that it's going to be approved, then I don't have to give those notices.
I think ELS works with providers.
But
Sure.
I think that grace period, I mean, is already built in. It's there. There's plenty of time there, I think.
Oh, yeah, I'd be
on-
doing it 6 months out.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of time, and there has to be some accountability on the provider side.
Right.
To keep their stuff in line. You know, your responsibility is to your students, to your clients, you have to make sure that they're gonna get what they pay for.
Right.
And as far as whether we should, reapprove or, come back for subsequent approval every 4 years, you know, as well as our industry changes every year. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that changes constantly. The technology changes, plumbing, electric,
Because we're
they all
more
change.
technically oriented, I think 4 years is reasonable.
Yeah.
Yes,
Part of my compelling support of this change that Gwen pointed out was just what you said. The compelling reason in my mind was that there is a changing industry and the relevancy is so important. And I don't think it's fair, or I don't think it was in the best interest of the state of Texas to ignore the anecdotal evidence that was out there that could, in fact, change these courses. And that's the reason I think this rule even exists, to review these classes and make them relevant.
It's probably very fortunate that you have staff now to do that this time.
And I think just because we're the first ones to do it doesn't make it wrong.
Well, and we just came back from DC, and this caught some attention with Arello that we were doing this, and I think there was broad, if not very wide, I think 42 states were represented, very broad support of what we're doing. You folks are being watched by a number of other similar agencies that either license or at least watch the inspector industry, and I think this is a new day that's opened some eyes of how this very group is dealing with a very relative, applicable solution to 18 years. That startled me to think that a class is that old and no one's ever looked at it.
I mean, we've made it a focus on this committee. I know the 5 years I've been here, that education of our inspectors is the most important thing, and keeping the education available up to date is the first item.
And I applaud you.
Yes, Ms. Hubbard?
Had one question, because Jennifer's been great, we're working with her on reapproval. In our discussion on Friday, it was pointed out that, I guess, a lot of the forms that we're supposed to use that are on the website.
Yes.
Because you were kind of explaining this to me. There's like the core course, 120, or 130 hours, then there's the 200. It's like the forms are for the 200. There aren't forms for the...
You're talking about the number of hours that are
Yeah,
listed
exactly.
on
They're not a
the
form.
topical course
Yeah.
approval forms.
And the other thing I'm concerned about on the appliance one, 2 years ago, the form that's on there still includes vacuum systems and some of the things that were taken away.
That's not on there.
And it's not,
Yeah.
it's not current.
Yeah.
So I don't know
That's-
what
yeah.
to do about that.
The
Okay.
topics that
I
are
just
required are
wondered.
the topics that are required by the statute or the commission
No, I
rule for
understand
each
that.
subject.
But-
So those were just forms that were approved at one time to satisfy a model, but the same can be applied to any application, any course application, because it's still those topics that are required to be covered.
Yeah, but the forms that are there give those hours for the 200 and not hours for the other, for the separate topics. So
Well,
maybe
and-
it's just time to update the forms, I don't know. And especially the appliance one.
Forms is a whole nother issue.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Yeah.
That's already in the works.
But Jennifer's right, the
Already in
statute
the
and
works.
rules control over forms.
No, I
If there's ever any discrepancy.
Right.
No.
Ken?
I think this is under 7, where you're talking about the proctoring situation.
Mhm.
Yes.
For instance, with our testings that we have, our setup, I can tell you how many times the person took the test, when they took it, so there's no, in other words, my computer won't cheat.
Right.
So you can't call me and get a 15-hour course in one day. Now, we're talking about inspectors, but I'm just saying, we have control of that. Now, when when you go out to this third party, okay, I'm gonna use ProctorU for instance. I send it out to Bill, he does ProctorU, he fails it. Okay, now he wants to go to his church. Who's gonna monitor all that? Who's gonna catch him? He's gonna go over there and take the same test again.
Who's responsible?
There's no
It's the-
enforcement.
is
How
it
are you
provided?
guys gonna do that?
The provider is responsible to making sure that the proctor,
Really think that's gonna happen?
well, there are
How you gonna
ways and
catch me?
methods.
All right, just say I'm the
Okay.
guy. How you gonna catch me?
Well, if he takes one test and fails it, then he's gotta get a new test. He can't
Right.
just take this test. So he says, okay, I wanna go to the church. How would you, as a provider, send that to the church, and what would be the instruction?
I'd send him a new test. I'd send him a test to the church.
Right?
But how do you know he failed the first one? What is the check system? There's no check system. It's a great rule. I got no problem with it.
You mean if he fails the first one, the proctor lets you know?
Yeah, the proctor's supposed to let you
But like,
know.
okay, ProctorU, we're looking at that. If ProctorU will say, okay, failed it. Now, the second time, he don't want to go to ProctorU. He wants to go to his library.
The provider is the one that's grading the test. The proctor simply administers it and
Right.
sends it back to the provider, so the provider grades the test, and if the applicant fails, then you notify the applicant, you have failed this test.
Right?
Do
We
you
do
want
that.
to retake it?
I'm gonna do that.
I think
Roy's gonna do that. They're gonna do that.
What he's saying
There's
is
a bunch
the
of them out there got those 18-year-old courses that are not gonna do that, and you're not gonna be able to catch them.
the unscrupulous ones are not going to admit that they failed the first test.
Never. You're gonna throw it in the trash.
And they're just going to give them the same.
You're never gonna see my
No, no,
proctor.
what she's saying is
The
the
proctor.
provider grades the test, not the proctor. The proctor just makes sure they're not cheating.
So the provider
Right.
So
knows
the
you
provider
failed
knows
it.
you failed it.
The provider
Yeah.
knows.
Well, what he's saying is, where's the checks and balance on the provider?
Yeah.
That if that first test
Oh,
has
on the
failed.
provider.
I gotta
Well,
compete with these
you
guys.
know,
How's
That's
that work?
where-
That
that's where
goes
he's
back, that goes back to the whole audit process, which is gonna be next year's project.
But as
How you gonna
a,
audit it if I throw it away?
but as a provider, when you send out the different tests, the proctor has to send you back the same test that you sent.
Just like we do now.
With
They
the
mail it
answers.
all back, the whole, when we send out a proctor test to a library,
Yes, I know, but,
they send the whole test back, okay, if that guy
Yes.
fails it,
yes,
I have the option of chunking it and sending it over to his preacher now, or using ProctorU now. I don't have to make him wait, because you're never gonna know.
you mean the provider would
The provider would know. but
game the
you-
system?
Right.
I'm just saying.
Well, and that's on the provider, like Carrie said. I mean, we would know in an audit.
There is no
That
audit.
would
You can't
be
catch us on audit.
That's what he's saying.
There will be.
If you want to round the system as a provider, right now, there's a way around the system. There's no checks and balance. So that's something that we probably
That's
really need
check
to
and
look at
balance.
for next
But
year,
with-
Like I
as
said,
far as accountability.
Once
But
we
with
get
the
these
testing
rules in
system we
place,
have-
the audit process is next.
Yes.
It's just
The
make
audit
the whole-
process is great for the system I have now, because you can come in and say, I want to see Bill Smith, when did he take the test? And I can't erase the computer. It's there, it's logged in.
Yeah.
He took it 6 times,
Right.
and here's the exam he took every time.
Well, we're
I have
hoping
control.
our
I don't have
providers
control over libraries and
honest,
notaries.
trustworthy, have
Loyal,
integrity.
helpful, friendly, kind.
I mean, there we're back to the balance of trying to provide as many avenues for taking the test without being so restrictive, to
Right.
control that.
Right.
There's always going to be integrity involved, it's always going to be
Right.
in question, unless we.
And that's why we have approved providers and not just, random
And like you say,
fly-by-night providers who just want to take the consumer's money and not make sure they get a good education.
But we can't spend time on accountability if we don't have a rule in place.
Correct. So we'll get there.
And that is the reason why the chair that I sit next to has asked for an electric chair.
we're in Texas. And we use it. We can open carry come January. Okay. Any other discussion?
I'm good.
And I have one more from Stan.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
No.
No. Yeah, I agree completely.
Okay.
I'm the first one to suggest to you that things change, including at least the standards, if not the technology for home building and how houses are built. And I'm all for that. We integrate that into our courses even before there's any requirement for them. So I'm not worried about that. It's just that if you want to if maybe get to the bottom of this, is I'm really concerned about these, all these courses are coming due at the end of the year. I mean, that's a lot of courses.
But we've known it for 4 years.
We have, but the one, my understanding of that rule was that you could not submit it until 3 months before. Now,
No.
no, but graciously.
I think we talked about that one of the previous
That came up
meetings.
We
several
did.
times.
We actually
Yeah.
specifically
Talked about that
talked about it.
multiple
I
times.
remember you saying, whoa, we can do it anytime. That's
Well,
good.
because my understanding was staff graciously said, well, we're not going to enforce
Well,
that.
knowing
We're
that
gonna-
there's
No,
a-
that's, Mr. Arbuck, that's not what staff said. What they said was that the 90-day period was when the commission gives the provider notification that the first notification that their course is up for reapproval. That it's not, that there's nothing that says they can't submit that course earlier than that. That's when we put it on ourselves to remind the provider, hey, your course is coming up, it's going to expire, you need to start the process.
I
In case you're
understand.
over it.
Well, when did those reminders come? We've never gotten anything.
We're not 90 days out yet.
Well, you don't have expiration
Actually, right
dates.
now.
But we do because of the new.
We do
Now
have
you- now
expiration
you
on the
do.
rules, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, to get to the bottom of this, I guess I'm just really concerned that is this kind of going to be this 4-year cycle. Now, all these courses are coming up, and we're going to have an onslaught. We just found out that we submitted a course, and Jennifer got the application. All the materials are missing, all the videos are missing. So,
That's why there's 90 days in case something like that happens.
I understand.
Share
I'm
that
just saying,
information.
I'm sympathetic here with staff in that this is going to be a big onslaught, and it's going to come every 4 years. So all I'm concerned about here, we're going to try to renew our courses as conscientiously as we can and so forth. But what happens if we don't find out until after the first of the year on the courses that are due to expire at the end of the year?
I would say you would.
There's a gap,
you would know
you see, because, what's that?
before- I would say you would know before then, unless you waited until the last minute to apply.
Yeah, that's
If
my
your-
real concern.
If your company is to provide education, and I'm not attacking you, please don't get me wrong, but if I'm an education provider, and that's my job, and the focus of my business is to provide education to people, I'm not going to submit that application and say, oh, it's in there, it's in the works, it's going to be done. There's going to be some accountability. I'm going to make sure, well before that expires, that I'm still going to be able to provide that course to my students. There has to be accountability on the provider side to make sure that your courses are done properly. Yes, there's probably going to be some backlog, especially in the next 3 months as these 4-year courses, come up. But as a provider, I would think you're going to take that time and say, you know what, course 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they're all coming expired. I'm going to make sure every single one of them get approved well ahead of time. To sit and try to push some of this stuff off and give grace periods on the backside, I think there's been plenty of accountability, there's been plenty of time for providers to get done what they need to get done. There really shouldn't be any reason.
Well,
to
I
push it back.
apologize, because that's our misunderstanding of that rule. Our understanding of the rule was that you it used to be 6 months, and then they shortened it to 3 months.
It came
so
up
that
a
you-
couple, when this first
Yeah.
was
So,
submitted.
It's our fault, because we
July meeting.
misinterpreted the rule. But
Go for
now,
it.
go ahead.
Get them all in. Yes, sir.
For instance, my dilemma, I'm with Texas Tech, for instance, so it's correspondence now.
I'm sorry.
But anyway, we can't submit, as of right today,
They have
before the rule
restrictions.
change, I have to submit it under the university. If the university goes away, as we're anticipating, I'll pay approval for all these courses now. It goes with the university.
Well,
Now, if I want to offer them myself, I gotta turn around and pay it all again. So we're talking $15,000.
I mean, the requirement to be attached to the university goes away. It doesn't mean you can't stay with the university.
Right, doesn't mean you can't stay with it if you want to stay with them.
Yes. I mean, there's some recognition, there's some.
But I'm saying, there's no way I can get them approved now under my own name,
Why not?
because you can't do correspondence unless you're associated with the university.
I'm not sure, and I'll have to talk with Gwen and Jen about this, that if you know that, which we'll know here officially November 2nd, right after the commission meeting, that correspondence is no longer required to be offered in association with the university, and you have a course that's correspondence that expires December 31st, if you're one of those, or after that, why couldn't you apply for a new course to be effective January 1st under your own name? Why couldn't you do that?
I'm asking you.
What if it doesn't pass? I mean,
In November, if it passes, then you could.
That's what I'm saying. In November, you'll know for sure.
Right.
Which
Then
gives you
have
2
a
months.
Yeah.
Two
See, I just had them all approved for Texas A&M Commerce before,
Yeah.
last year, with a 4-year approval. Texas A&M Commerce went away. I switched to Texas Tech. They all went to Texas A&M. Now I gotta get them all reapproved for Texas Tech, although I'm the guy making up all the tests. I'm the guy got them all provided. I'm the guy paying for it.
So you're
I
a
can't use-
provider.
I know, no, yeah.
Yes.
Well, no, that went away. There was an ICE provider. Then the ICE providership went away and became just a regular MCE providership, used the same number. So we were the first one, or us or Roy, I think, was the first champions, was one of the first 2 that got ICE numbers.
Yeah, I
Paid the money, got them all approved under the ICE number, then all of a sudden the ICE number went away. We went back to MCE numbers.
Right.
That's like,
Which
wait
we
a minute.
use for continuing education for both real estate.
But I mean,
and-
but like right now, I can't submit anything for approval. I'm out. I can't, none of my 20 inspection courses are approved. They were approved through Texas A&M Commerce, but when I switched to Texas Tech, I'm out until I get them all resubmitted. But I'm not gonna resubmit them if they're gonna go away. I don't want to pay double.
Yeah.
So I'm out till January the 1st.
Staff will look at the practicality of that and how we approve them, well, you know, for those instances where there is gonna be that switch. But I really don't see why you can't apply for these to be effective January 1st.
As soon as you know that the rules have been adopted.
Right.
November 2nd.
That's what's
You should
gonna
be able
happen,
to
I'm just
submit it.
saying.
Yeah.
There's a transition in there with
Sure.
all this other stuff.
Sure.
It's not just one thing going away, once the universities are taken out, why would I wanna keep paying the university a
Well,
percentage if I don't
exactly.
have to?
And that was one of the motivating factors of doing that is.
But staff understands there's
I
gonna be a
like it. I get a
transition
raise.
period.
Do I?
Staff understands there's gonna be a transition period, and we will work with you within the rules to accomplish that.
Yeah.
Well, if, let's say he watches the commissioners meeting on November 2nd, and then they approve it on November 3rd, if he doesn't, why couldn't he just submit the course for approval at that time, and as soon as he gets that letter back, it's approved then, not necessarily January 1st, it's
Well,
approved that day.
because the rule probably
It's
won't be effective
effective.
until January 1st.
Oh, I got you, okay.
So again, that's
still
to
apply.
allow you
You can still apply on the very next day and get that process.
Not
Exactly.
that day. That's been my delay, even with real estate courses, the same way. I'm not reapplying all my real estate courses for the same reason. I'm having to wait to see what happens in November.
Staff's just gonna be busy for a couple of months.
Just like we have been.
It's gonna be worse.
We've been doing this.
You're gonna be inundated.
Yeah, well, I think we've already approved 40,
Well, they
just in the
kinda,
last several months, 40 of these
They're gonna do a
courses
lot.
They had non-expiration.
Not
dates.
inspection.
that didn't have expiration
Right.
dates.
And not all those courses are even being submitted.
Yeah, that would be me.
There's a lot of them that
Right.
just, you know.
Yeah, so.
Nobody's taking
They're
them,
done.
so.
We'll have them all back
You know, they're
out.
not, providers aren't
It's just a matter of getting them
submitting
reapproved. It's just, and I understand it, it's a process. We all, you know, he's talking about the expiration date. We do the same thing every 2 years with the broker responsibility and the,
Right.
like right now, we're doing legal ethics. We're telling everybody, this course expires 12/31. Now, 12/31, we give them 6 months.
Right,
12/31, you're not finished, you're not gonna be able to get into that test.
right.
You're gonna have to call us, we're gonna have to update your material and switch you over to the new one. Which is basically what, what Stan was talking about. You just have the approval process
Right.
there.
It is.
And again, it falls back on us to make sure we're ready.
Right,
You can't let them complete 26449 January 3rd.
right, right.
Okay.
All right. I mean, it's just a dilemma we're in.
Answer your
Well,
question.
able.
Looks, it sounds favorable.
Yeah, I'm feeling chipper.
Get a pay.
I'm back in the
Say
state.
that a lot.
Gwen, I'll never forget that.
Anything, do you have something different, Stan?
Yeah, a little different. This is kind of what we're getting at, is that there's a lot of transition here, and we have the new rules for the exam questions. So do we try to satisfy those exam question requirements now, even though the rule hasn't passed, you know? And I have to say, staff has been working with us wonderfully on trying to work this out. But I'm just saying that it kind of leaves things in kind of an unsettled situation.
I don't see things changing there.
Let me address that, because that's already a rule, and there is going to be a slight modification that I will probably recommend to ESAC as well. Currently, under our existing rules, if there is a change in course requirements in the existing rules, then a distance education provider has 15 months, a classroom education provider has 12 months to update their course and submit the whole course for reapproval, and they get a refund of the balance in the time that was left. If you had a 4-year course and you were 2 years into it and you had to update your course and send in for reapproval, you had to pay the whole thing, but you got reimbursed for 2 years of it. That was originally put in place to deal with mostly when course subject matter requirements changed. Although the rule addresses all course requirements, so I would say, reading the rule, it does apply today. The change that I'm going to recommend to ESAC and to the Commission is that at the time these new course requirements are adopted, that staff will recommend and the Commission can decide whether it is the type of requirement that has to be, the whole course has to be resubmitted, or could a course be supplemented with those several elements. And we would recommend that the same time period, 12 months or 15 months, depending on the type of delivery method, would still apply. So my recommendation in this particular instance, after talking with Gwen and Jen, would be that the examination banks and the multiple versions of exams and whatever the few other little things are, and there aren't that many of them, that's the main one for the course, that would be able to be supplemented to an existing course rather than require a full reapproval of the entire course and give them 15 or 12 months to come up to speed on those new requirements.
So, thank you. That's
Yeah,
good to
that's
hear
yours.
that. That takes a lot of
But
work.
again, that's a recommendation. These committees make their recommendations, and then the commission is the ultimate policy
But you're
maker.
addressing it, I appreciate it.
Right.
Okay. That covers everything on F and G. Okay. Correct? Number,
We don't need an action because we didn't change anything, right?
No.
Well, I mean, it's, I guess, do they need to make a motion on whether or not that to recommend these?
You could recommend that you support
These-
staff recommended changes.
like,
And I can
like
tell you
deleting
that.
that one up there?
Deleting that one and the change to the question bank requirement and the proctor
proctors and the
requirement.
staff supplement.
So there's the tweaks that staff made in response to certain
I'll
comments.
entertain a motion by,
I'll make that motion
Second.
how do you want to, would you say that?
to accept the staff recommendations with the modifications as proposed.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, how are we hearing with Ryan?
Mr. Woods, are you okay with that?
Okay. That was everybody, okay. Okay. And we'll forward that up with you have our endorsement on those changes.
Great, thank you.
Discuss some possible action regarding recommendations from the SOP committee.
Nothing
We
this
did
time.
not have.
Nothing at this time.
Okay. We're down to the toughest one, number 9. Any future agenda meeting, agenda items? You may have something from the SOP.
We may eventually, but not currently.
Do you foresee anything from the subchapters? The ones we just finished, that should go through the main commission and probably won't have any more. Yes.
I was just going to say, one of the things that had been discussed is in the, and this has been in the rules for a while, even before the rule review, is that the inspector committee has the ability to look at courses, inspector courses that are brought before the commission to weigh in on various things. And so staff had been-
Physical courses?
Yeah, and
Okay.
staff had been talking about whether or not with the requirements that, with the fact that these courses are going to be coming up and things of that nature, whether or not it would be of a benefit to have the education subcommittee start looking at some of these courses.
Just to verify kind of relevance with
That,
the field.
and then also coming up with determining, some ideas on how, what do we have the thing for the, where we have the course topics and then subdivided, that sort of thing as well, right?
Mhm.
You want to,
Course approval form?
yeah,
And
but.
the guidelines.
The
The
guidelines,
guidelines.
that's it. And come up
Okay.
with guidelines in terms of giving some direction as to, not dictating, some direction to the providers in terms of how.
I mean, we went through some of the breakdown of the hours a few years ago.
Right, but this would be not as global as that was.
Okay.
This would be more along the lines of.
specific.
Yeah, for case in point, we have those types of things for real estate courses where we have suggested number of hours per
Right.
topic, or unit or whatever.
And
so-
specific topics that must be covered.
Right,
And you
so-
have those in your rules
I mean,
already.
it's kind of like when you go through the permitting in the city, you've got like a master plan
Right.
that might
Exactly.
streamline
Exactly.
approval if you're following the recommended.
Right.
So,
Okay.
but obviously, the place where that would go would be,
The
the education subcommittee to kind of iron out all of that, the intricacies of that before bringing it before the
Okay.
subcommittee. But
I
that
like that
was,
idea.
is there anything I missed on that, or?
No, but as a future agenda item, you might want to delegate to the education subcommittee approval of course content if the staff brings it to them.
I think that would be appropriate.
Absolutely.
We've discussed that.
And I remember years ago when the staff was still overwhelmed.
Right.
Fred and a number of people were volunteering to come and help review course
So,
content.
we could add that to a future agenda item if you wanted to,
Okay.
and then,
Would it require an agenda discussion to enact
I
that
think so.
procedure?
You can delegate that, I think, as chair.
To the subcommittee.
yeah, because right now, it's in the rules, it's the full committee has the, is given the authority to look at these, so this would just be a,
We just never have approached.
you've never
We've
set
never
up a process,
So it's
really,
already, the procedure, protocol in there is already stated
Correct.
we can do that.
as a full committee, right? So this would just be a matter of how you
I
want to
would
do
make
that.
that, I would make that recommendation to use that education subcommittee.
Okay. So we can add that to a future agenda item.
Mr. Harper?
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it possible, with the discussion that having this on the agenda, and we talked about before, 5:35 to 12 on 120 hours?
I wrote it down here to talk with staff.
Okay, and I understand, I didn't realize Greg wasn't doing well. Is that the situation?
It's a medical condition.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that. I apologize for not being on top of that, but I hope he's
No
getting
problem.
better. It may not, depending upon his circumstances, maybe the committee would, or the chair would consider having that addressed at a full committee
Yes.
if he's not able to do that. Thank you.
And just so you know that, as chair of this committee, you are an ad hoc member of any subcommittee, so you could sit in for Greg and with the rest of the committee members on education,
Yes.
so.
Make sure we have a quorum and keep that going, but I like that idea. We'll talk with staff about that. Okay. Number 10, future meeting dates.
Oh, wow, I don't have the calendar in front of me.
This one snuck up on you.
Well, the
I just don't have
commission
the calendar.
meeting is November
I
2nd,
was gonna say,
so
give us a window based on.
Well, it'd be after,
what,
the
January?
question is whether or not there would be a need for a meeting between now and the next commission meeting, which would be in February.
Yeah, I
We
would
have to have
think,
a February meeting.
I would think, well, they have to have a
Either
You
February
have to have a
meeting.
February meeting.
So whether or not
Right.
that
When's
you
the February
feel,
commission meeting in February? The 8th?
So we probably, what, end of January?
well,
We can do Monday, February the 1st.
Yeah,
still
you
be
have to do
within.
February
It has to
because
be
of the
February.
Correct,
election.
but it does not, well, yeah, if you want to have it before. What way it happened, I believe, last year was you had a meeting in December via teleconference to deal with some stuff, and then you had a meeting at the end of February to elect the officers. Right. So you could do it that way again if you wanted to, Mr. Reinhardt, or you could just wait and have a meeting on that,
Whatever that Monday is.
in February and take care of all the business at that point. If you felt that there was a need to have another meeting before then, you could always do it.
Unless something comes up fairly important, discussing the education committee, I think, did we lose him?
I think so. I
Yeah,
think he-
At this point, I don't see anything happening on the agenda. I mean, I will.
And you can call one at any time,
Yes.
obviously, if something comes up, but you need your subcommittees to meet, your SOP again and your education, and then they can report to you if they have
Okay.
agenda items.
Well, let's do that. So, do we want to pick a date for February then?
I think we
February
disconnected.
1 will work, and that gets in before the commission meeting.
That's a full week before the meeting.
That's a Monday week, yeah.
We disconnected. I don't know, it just.
At the subscriber's request, this phone does not accept income.
He's had enough, Tony, give up.
Track block.
Don't buy it.
9 o'clock on the 1st?
February 1st, we're talking?
Yeah.
Does 9 o'clock work for everybody?
Oh, man, it puts
Well,
me around.
Well, I mean, there have to be
Hey, we
traffic
can go-
concerns.
I'd be all for
so-
7, but you guys want to do 9, I'm perfectly okay with it. I go earlier, but that's just.
I agree.
Brad,
Yes, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock, okay. I don't think there's leaving 30 minutes earlier and get in front of the traffic. There's no getting in front of it.
If I leave
You
at
never
6:30
know.
to 6:45, I miss the traffic getting in here.
But
If I
you're
leave
here
at
2
7
hours
o'clock or a
before.
few minutes later, I'm in the traffic.
Okay. I
Having-
did pretty good, 2
having
hours.
lots of
to make
experience
60
with this
miles.
trip for many years.
Actually, it was an hour for the last 7 miles.
Just got, you just can't get down the block.
We were an hour,
Doesn't give any time, does it?
hour and a half, because we got caught up in it, but if we'd left 15 minutes earlier, we would not have been on it. Based on previous.
Earlier.
I'm in a little
drive back
hybrid,
up.
doesn't use any gas, so I sit there and.
All right. Okay, so we're set for the 1st at 9 o'clock, February.
Are we all agree with it, that deconflicted with staff's requirements?
What's that?
February 1st.
I have no requirements.
Are you in town?
I'm here. I serve at the will of the chair. so-
Oh, boy.
It's getting thick in here, we better.
It appears the 1st of February at 9 a.m. And we'll keep everybody posted on subcommittee meeting. Do we have any subcommittee meetings scheduled?
Not currently, but we're likely to have an SOP meeting or two, and probably an education, if we can get an education subcommittee.
Got time. Okay. If there's nothing else.
Motion adjourned.
We don't have to have a motion, we just
Just,
have to.
I would say we're adjourned. 10:54.